When it comes to smoking weed, I used to view it as an escape. And I think I was escaping from three things in particularly depression, stress and anxiety, and we're going to use the generalized term of trauma to wrap up everything else, okay? And a large part of my weed consumption had to do with the want to escape from each of those categories of things: stress and anxiety, depression, and trauma. And when it came down to quitting and breaking my weed addiction, what I had to realize was that weed addiction was far from an escape, but rather a whole new level of imprisonment and entrapment when it came to both my mental health, my physical health, and my overall well being. And that's exactly what I want to address in today's brief video. If you're new to the channel, my name's Dr. Frank. I'm the founder of Addiction Mindset Recovery Coaching Programs, which are dedicated to helping people quit nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content, substances that I once struggled with. You can find more resources in the pinned video comment below about our programs if you want to look into them further. So, the first idea is that weed is an escape from depression. And when we fall into the cycle of addiction, I want to explain how this works. So, when you become addicted to a drug, you consume that drug, and that drug releases a bunch of dopamine and serotonin and other feel good neurotransmitters and hormones and things like that. Okay? So, I smoke weed, I get a big hit of dopamine. Now, I feel really good for a little bit. But what eventually happens is my body recognizes and it says, okay, your brain has been flooded with dopamine. So now I have to down regulate that. I have to turn down the volume on that. And then shortly after the high, we experience the crash. And the crash is often a very, very depressing experience. And this depression is considered a large part of the withdrawal symptoms. So we consume weed, we get a bunch of dopamine. Our body says, wait a minute, too much dopamine is present. I'm going to shut down that dopamine. I'm going to turn down the volume on it. And now we're depressed. And we go through this swing state of extreme highs and extreme lows throughout each day. Now, a big thing that I had to realize was that weed wasn't helping the already pre-existing depression, much of which was resulting from the consequences of my addiction to cannabis. It was simply making it harder to escape and actually deal with and manage the depression that I was facing. And listen, I understand there's medical benefits and it can help with depression and all that, but we're talking about addiction in today's video. Stress and anxiety. What was happening was I was finding myself very stressed. I was stressed over my relationships. I was stressed over my financial situation. I was stressed over continuing to do something that I no longer wanted to be doing anymore. Addiction and the consequences of addiction, my deteriorating physical health from cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, my increasing depression with my increased smoking was all stressing me out and creating a lot of anxiety. So I would smoke weed and I would think, I've calmed myself down. I'm feeling better now. The only calmness, the only stress that I was relieving was the stress of wanting another hit of cannabis because I was addicted. It's very similar to smoking cigarettes or vaping. You consume nicotine. Nicotine releases a lot of dopamine. Your brain says, whoa, too much. You get a crash later on. That crash results in feelings of stress, anxiety, and cravings. You consume more nicotine, and suddenly you feel better. That's the cycle of addiction. The only stress it's relieving is the stress that it created, while actually multiplying and magnifying many other areas of your life that might be stressful. Again, finances, relationships, physical health, mental health, procrastinating on things, lack of motivation on things, whatever it may be. So weed was not an escape from the depression. Weed was not an escape from the stress and anxiety. And lastly, in my opinion, addiction is a traumatizing experience in and of itself. What we go through, no matter how extreme or how minute it may seem, if you are suffering with addiction, it is traumatizing. Spending weeks, months, or years of your life continuing to do something that you don't want to be doing anymore, continuing to feel like you don't have control over this situation is trauma. That is a traumatizing experience. And let's say you grew up with a rough family history, right? My parents were divorced, love both of my parents, fortunately have a relationship with both of them, but that was a lot to go through if you've been through divorce, if you've been through family issues. Maybe you've been through something 1,000 times more horrific. And I've talked to plenty of people who have. That what they've gone through makes my life look like a walk in the park. But what I want to tell you is the resulting consequences of addiction create a whole new set of trauma. And if the only way we know how to deal with trauma is through substance use, how are we going to deal with the trauma created by cannabis, created by cannabis addiction? We're going to turn to using more of the substance, which is going to send us through these swings of highs and lows when it comes to dopamine, which is going to add to our stress and anxiety due to the consequences of addiction and create a whole new set of trauma for us. Now, I think one of the most powerful things you can do when it comes to quitting cannabis or any addiction is recognizing that it's not an escape. It's quite literally an entrapment. It's holding you back from actually pursuing fixing the anxiety, fixing the depression, addressing the trauma, and living a life that you deserve to live. Addiction promises you less anxiety, less depression, less trauma, and it creates all of those things. Addiction is a lie. That addictive voice is constantly making you false promises. And the sooner you can recognize that, the sooner you can call that out, the sooner you're going to be able to quit. And that's exactly what our programs are all about. So if you want to go deeper on this, if you want to do a one-on-one call, if you want to get the free guide to quitting smoking weed, if you want to join our addiction mindset group accountability coaching, it's affordable for everyone. We're removing all barriers for you guys here in our programs to quitting. Check out the pinned comment, check out the video description, and get at it. Or just follow me into the next video where I talk more about addiction and depression. I'll see you guys there.